When this camera came out back in March of 2022, the original price was $299. Recently, Insta360 has been running sales on it, and it's now going for $269 new. So Insta360 has reduced this by 10%, and in my opinion, it makes this camera the best value 4K action camera you can get right now. Let's talk about why. First of all, the Insta360 ONE RS can film 4K 60 stabilized footage in camera, and it can do that with a bitrate of 100 megabits per second, and the footage looks really good. In fact, in my opinion, the footage from this camera is a bit of a hybrid of the DJI Action 3 and the GoPro Hero 11. The detail in the footage more so reminds me of the GoPro, but at the same time, the colors of this camera more so remind me of the Action 3. So in a way, I think it kind of has the best of both worlds with the footage. Reason number 2, I consider this camera a great value. It can take 48 megapixel photos. Now, megapixels aren't everything with photos, but they do matter to some degree, especially if you want to crop that photo later on when you're editing it. Having those extra megapixels can be really helpful, and this camera has plenty of them to go around. Reason number 3, I love the value of the Insta360 ONE RS 4K edition, is this camera, even though it's the 4K edition, it can film 6K widescreen 2.35:1 video. That 6K widescreen video is that classic cinematic look. It's got the black bars on the top and the bottom, and it looks really, really good, especially if you film it in the 6K mode and then downscale your final product to 4K. There's more pixels crammed together in there, and the footage just looks superb. That is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated things about this camera. That 6K mode I love. Now, you are limited to filming in 24 or 25 frames per second, so there is that limitation, and there's not in-camera stabilization on it. But even though there's not that stabilization, the Insta360 ONE RS has gyroscope data that it retains in the footage, and you can put this into the Insta360 desktop studio app later on, and you can add that stabilization to it. And that is really cool that they have that gyroscope data. You don't just have to use their program. You can use other ones that use that data to stabilize footage, but their studio program is really good. And I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit as well. I was very excited about that 6K mode, especially on a $269 camera. Even when it was $299 at full price, I still loved the value that that mode brought to this camera. Number 4 reason I love the value of this camera is you can do 360-degree horizon leveling. Now, there's a few steps to do that, and it involves some configuration on the camera and then some editing later on in the Insta360 Studio desktop app. But what you do here is you make sure you're in video mode, and once you're in video mode, what you're gonna do is you're gonna click on that, and you're gonna click down here at the bottom. And you can only do this in 4K 30, so you gotta first of all put it to 4K 30. And then up here where it says flow state, that's the stabilization, you need to select post. This means you're gonna stabilize your footage in post, and that's also where you're gonna be able to do the horizon leveling. Once you've selected that, you're gonna swipe left from the side here, and you're gonna go over all the way to the left-hand option. You're gonna see horizon lock, and you want to set that to on. By default, it's probably gonna be off. When you set it to on, what you can do is you can film like normal, and you can turn the camera every which way like this, and on the camera, you won't see the horizon lock, but it's going to have that ability when you edit later on. So when you then import that into the desktop studio later on, that clip is going to allow you to do either 45-degree horizon leveling or a full 360-degree horizon lock. Now, like I said, it is fairly limited. It's not as refined as some of the competitors, especially the Hero 11. The GoPro Hero 11 has some really good horizon lock options built into the camera, but it is an option there if you want to use it. Reason number 5 I love the value of this camera is it has the active HDR mode. Now, the active HDR mode is really helpful. It really brings out a lot of those details in the shadows and the highlights, and it also has a pretty good natural color to it. So I consider the active HDR mode a great mode for those of you who don't want to do a lot of extensive grading or color correcting later on. It's just great to get clips straight out of the camera with that mode and edit them together to tell your story. This camera also has some great slow motion capabilities. You can do up to 8 times slow motion using 1080p and up to 4 times slow motion using 2.7K. Now, the slow motion capabilities are not as impressive as those of competitors, The Action 3 and the Hero 11 can both do 4K 120, which is pretty great. But that being said, that 2.7K, you can technically take that and upscale it to 4K, and it's still gonna look okay. There's enough detail there. Now, if you don't need a lot of extreme slow motion, you just want a little bit, you can use 4K 60 on here, and then when you put that footage on a 30 or 24 frames per second timeline, you can slow it down. You can do 50% of the original speed on a 30 frames per second timeline, and you can do 40% of the original speed on a 24 frames per second timeline. Reason number 7 I love the value of this camera is the Insta360 desktop studio software. This software is completely free from Insta360. All you need is the serial number of a camera that you've purchased from them. When you enter that in, it will unlock the software for you to use it. It's actually very powerful software. You can do a lot in there. You can stabilize your clips. Like I said, if you didn't use the stabilization in here, you can do it in post. Especially with that 6K mode, all the gyroscope data is retained, and you can stabilize it and have it looking really nice. You can also do some other grading aspects with your footage in that app, and then you can export your clips, and there's a lot of control over the quality when you export them as well. You can fine-tune a lot. So I'm very impressed for it being free software. Props to Insta360 for that. In addition, Insta360 has a great app that you can use on your smartphone to do some quick edits of that footage and export those clips to share on platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, and others. So they have a pretty good app as well for that. And I've already talked about this, but reason number 8 I love the value of this camera is that gyroscope data that's built into the footage and retained so you can stabilize it later on. Now, of the Insta360 ONE RS's competitors, the Hero 11 does have the gyroscope data, but the Action 3 does not yet anyway. So if you were to film Action 3 footage without it stabilized, it would be very difficult to stabilize it well in post-production. But this camera at a lower price than the Action 3 has that gyroscope data in there. Reason number 9 I love the value of this camera is you can do 8K time lapses with this camera. That's right, 8K, and you have to do it through the interval mode specifically, but you can do individual 8K photos at a set interval, and you can then put those together later on and make a finished product time lapse or night lapse with those. I absolutely love it that this camera has 8K time-lapse capabilities built into it. In my opinion, that's another one of those underrated features about this camera, and it's pretty sweet to have that there. When you export that time-lapse later on as a 4K time-lapse, it looks extra good. Reason number 10 I love the value of this camera is it does have 3 color modes. It's got standard, vivid, and log. Now, it's not abnormal for action cameras to have several color modes built into them, and having log there is great if you want to grade that footage later on and make it look extra good by bringing out all of the details that you want to. And in addition to that, Insta360 has a LUT available for free that can make it nice and easy to color grade that footage and have it looking really nice. Reason 11 I love the value of this camera is you can get a 360 module or a 1-inch module to pop on here in place of the 4K module. You don't have to go out and buy a whole separate camera. So if you decide later on you want to add 360 capability, all you have to do is pop this off, pop it on, you're good to go. Furthermore, you can add the Leica 1-inch mod if you want to have better low light performance and even higher quality footage. Insta360 sells that as well. And finally, reason 12 I consider this camera a great value is Insta360 has lots of accessories that you can purchase to go with it. So one of my favorites right here, and one that I consider essential, is their selfie stick. So they have the invisible selfie stick functionality, and this has pretty good extension to it. This isn't the extreme long one. Insta360 does make a selfie stick that extends really far. And I've used that with my X3 before, and I really like that because I find it especially useful with 360-degree footage. But when you're filming with the 4K mod on here, this selfie stick right here and the extension of it, I consider more than enough. And you of course can adjust the angle of your camera on it with the case that Insta360 includes with all the cameras. You pop it into here, and then you mount it on the end here, and you can easily change the angle. So there you have it. Those are the 12 reasons why I consider the Insta360 ONE RS probably the best value action camera on the market right now. If you're interested in buying the Insta360 ONE RS, I've linked to it below on the Insta360 website. You can check it out.